at Halberg International. The cleaning crew was a fixture everyone took for granted. They were the invisible workers, coming in after hours to change trash bags, wipe conference tables, and push their carts down empty hallways. People rarely paid them any attention, not out of malice, but simply out of habit. It was a Monday morning in downtown Fort Worth, Texas, and the main lobby buzzed with activity. Shoes clicked against the tile. Phones were tapped, and people talked about deadlines while clutching coffee cups like they held the answers to all the world's problems. Jonathan Kellerman, the company's CEO, was walking from the parking garage to his office on the 18th floor when something unusual caught his attention. A voice. Not just any voice, but one that was fluent, sharp, and effortlessly rolling through a language he hadn't heard in months. Mandarin. He stopped in his tracks, not because it was Mandarin, but because of who was speaking it. He glanced around, thinking maybe one of the international sales reps had come in early, but then he saw her, a woman in a burgundy janitor's uniform, her short twists pulled back into a ponytail. She was standing by the lobby directory, mid-conversation with an older man in a navy jacket and thick-rimmed glasses. The man looked both confused and relieved. She was calm, explaining something to him, and he seemed to understand perfectly. Kellerman squinted, recognizing her as one of the cleaning staff he'd passed by late at night after meetings. She was always polite, always quiet, but never made eye contact unless spoken to. He didn't even know her name. Yet here she was, speaking Mandarin like a native, explaining the building's logistics. As Kellerman moved closer, she finished speaking Mandarin and turned to face a delivery man holding a clipboard. Without skipping a beat, she switched into Spanish, and the delivery man blinked in surprise, muttering a quick gracias before heading off. She then turned to a vendor nearby, pointing at a set of mislabeled boxes, and spoke to him in French. Kellerman felt a strange tightening in his chest. He had spent over 2 decades in global logistics, overseeing international expansions and hiring translators. Yet here, in his own building, the most linguistically gifted person he had encountered in months was scrubbing toilets 2 floors below his office. He approached her, his curiosity growing. "Excuse me," he asked. She turned, startled but composed. "Yes, sir." He smiled faintly. "That was Mandarin, right?" "Yes, sir." "Do you speak it fluently?" "Yes." "And Spanish?" "French." She nodded. "Also Portuguese, German, Arabic, Italian, Swahili, and I read Latin, but I don't really count that." Kellerman blinked, taken aback. "You're telling me you speak 9 languages?" "Yes, sir," she replied, her tone devoid of pride or arrogance. She spoke with the simple truth of someone who was used to not being noticed. For a moment, he just stared at her, struggling to process the fact that a janitor in his building, someone who silently cleaned the floors every night, was more accomplished in languages than most people he knew in the business world. "What's your name?" he asked, finally breaking the silence. "Denise Atwater." "Miss Atwater," he said, "are you free for a few minutes?" Her brow furrowed slightly. "Now." "Yes," he said, "I'd like to talk to you in my office." She hesitated for just a moment, not out of fear, but because she had likely grown accustomed to being ignored or underestimated. With a slow nod, she agreed. Kellerman pressed the elevator button, holding the door open for her. As they rode up to the executive floor, the silence between them felt charged with anticipation. "I've worked here for 13 years, she said suddenly, her voice calm but tinged with emotion. "Never thought I'd be invited up." He turned toward her, offering a small, quiet smile. "You might be surprised how quickly things can change." But little did either of them know, things were about to change in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The elevator dinged as it reached the executive floor, and Denise stepped out first. Her shoes made barely a sound on the polished wood floor of the hallway, a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of the lower floors. The hallway smelled like citrus and leather, luxury, if you had to describe it by scent. Kellerman's assistant, who had been sitting behind a desk, looked up in surprise at the sight of Denise walking beside her boss. Kellerman didn't offer an explanation. He simply nodded at the assistant, who then quickly stood and let them pass. Inside the office, Denise took a seat across from Kellerman. He hadn't yet said a word about her language skills, but his mind was racing. How could someone like her, with so much potential, be relegated to cleaning floors? The conversation that would unfold between them would be one that neither of them could have predicted, setting the stage for a series of events that would not only alter Denise's life, but change the course of Kellerman's company as well. Denise stepped out of the elevator first, her shoes making almost no sound as they hit the polished wood floors of the executive hallway. The air was heavy with the scent of citrus and leather, luxury, wealth, the smell of success. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, almost indifferent environment she was accustomed to down on the lower floors. She'd spent years cleaning the hallways and offices, never drawing attention, always a shadow in the background. Now, she was walking beside the CEO himself, the man whose decisions affected thousands of employees worldwide. Kellerman's assistant, a young woman with wide eyes, glanced up in shock as Denise walked beside the CEO. The assistant clearly wasn't used to seeing a janitor in the executive area, let alone one in such close proximity to Kellerman. He didn't explain anything to her, just gave a silent nod that signaled for the assistant to let them through. Without a word, the assistant stepped aside. Inside the executive suite, the atmosphere was quiet, almost reverent. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering breathtaking views of downtown Fort Worth. The sunlight filtered through, casting a warm glow on the polished surfaces. The air was thick with power, influence, and the unmistakable feeling that this was a world of opportunity, one that Denise had never had a chance to experience. Until now, Kellerman gestured for her, "Sit down." He remained standing for a moment, studying her with an intensity that was hard to miss. His mind was racing. This woman, this janitor, had more knowledge, skill, and talent than most of the employees in his company. He had seen people in his industry with impressive resumes and glowing academic credentials, but here was someone with a true gift, someone who had been overlooked for far too long. Denise took a seat across from him, her posture calm, composed, yet somehow holding an underlying tension. She was used to being ignored, to being treated as invisible, but today was different. Today, she was in a place she had never imagined, surrounded by people who didn't understand the full extent of her potential. After a few moments of silence, Kellerman spoke. "I need to understand something. How is it that someone like you, someone with these incredible abilities, is working as a janitor here?" His voice was gentle, more curious than accusatory. Denise didn't immediately respond. Instead, she looked out the window for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. She had always kept her skills hidden, never sharing them with anyone. People didn't ask, and she didn't offer. It was easier that way. Finally, she looked back at him. "It's complicated, Mr. Kellerman," she said, her voice steady. "I've worked here for 13 years, and in all that time, no one has ever asked me what I can do. I'm just the person who mops the floors, takes out the trash, and cleans up after meetings." She paused, her gaze steady. "I never thought it would matter to anyone." Kellerman absorbed her words, the weight of them sinking in. He had never considered that the people cleaning his building might be anything more than part of the invisible infrastructure that kept things running smoothly. To him, they were just a part of the background noise, something that happened after hours. But now, he realized how wrong he had been. "I never knew," he said quietly. "I never knew you had all these skills, Denise. Mandarin, Spanish, French, 9 languages. That's extraordinary." He looked at her with a new level of respect. "How did you learn them?" Denise smiled faintly. "I've always loved languages. I taught myself most of them, books, audio courses, watching movies, talking to people whenever I could. I didn't have a formal education, but I had a desire to understand the world beyond the cleaning supplies and trash bags. So I learned." Her voice was matter-of-fact, but there was an undercurrent of pride, not in showing off, but in the quiet acknowledgement of her own perseverance. She had taken control of her own destiny, one language at a time, despite the constraints of her job and circumstances. Kellerman felt a pang of guilt as he listened to her. He had spent years building cross-cultural training programs, recruiting international talent, and growing Halberg's global presence. But he had never once stopped to think about the people who kept his company running behind the scenes. The people who, perhaps, had more to offer than he could have imagined. "I don't know what to say," he admitted after a long pause. I've spent so much time building this company, expanding it internationally, hiring translators, and yet I've never looked at the people who work here with a true understanding of their potential. I've never seen you the way I should have. Denise nodded slowly. It's not your fault, Mr. Kellerman. People like me are easy to overlook. We're in the background. We do the work no one wants to do, and we're expected to stay invisible. But that doesn't mean we don't have talents, skills, or dreams of our own. Kellerman leaned forward, his fingers steepled in front of him. What do you want, Denise? What do you want to do? The question hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Denise had never been asked that before, not by anyone who truly cared. She thought about it for a moment before answering. I want to make a difference, she said quietly. I want to use my languages to help people. I want to bridge gaps, connect cultures, and show people that there's more to us than just the roles we play. Kellerman's eyes sparkled with a new idea. We can make that happen. We're always expanding globally, and we could use someone like you, someone with real experience in bridging cultures. We could use someone who understands more than just business. Denise's heart skipped a beat. Was he serious? Did he really mean it? Are you offering me a job? She asked cautiously, unsure whether to believe it was real. Kellerman smiled, a rare smile that lit up his face. I'm offering you a chance, Denise. A chance to show us what you can really do. Not as a janitor, but as someone who can truly change the way we do business. Denise felt a lump form in her throat. She had spent so long being invisible, hiding her talents, that the idea of being seen, being acknowledged, felt almost overwhelming. But it also felt like a door opening, a door that had been closed to her for far too long. As she stood up to leave the office, Kellerman's assistant stood by the door, watching her with a mix of confusion and curiosity. Denise gave her a small smile as she walked past, her footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. She had stepped into a new world today, a world where she wasn't invisible anymore, and she was ready to make her mark. Denise said nothing. She wasn't someone who easily trusted praise. She had seen too many people talk big and do little. Kellerman continued, undeterred by her silence. I want to create a new position, he said. Something that doesn't exist here yet. Something this company really needs, even if we didn't know it until now. Denise furrowed her brow, her mind racing as she tried to process his words. What position? She asked, still unsure where he was going with this. A cultural liaison for international affairs, he replied. Someone who can speak the languages, read between the lines, handle visitors, vendors, documents, the global touchpoints that are constantly fumbling through. Someone who understands the world we're operating in. Denise's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She was stunned, caught off guard by the idea of a position that was specifically designed for her skill set. She never expected to hear these words. You think I'm qualified? She asked, her voice cautious. Qualified? Honestly, probably more than most of the people in our leadership team. You've already proved you can handle it with grace, patience, and brains. Denise stared at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. Is this real? She asked, still not quite believing what she was hearing. As real as it gets, Kellerman replied. I don't care about your college degree. You have something better, lived experience, commitment, and fluency in 9 languages. She shifted her weight, still unsure. Why me? Kellerman looked directly at her, his gaze steady. Because I watched you solve 3 problems in 3 languages before 9 a.m. yesterday. And because I'm tired walking past people like you, people who do twice the work for half the credit. Denise crossed her arms, her skepticism rising. You know what people are going to say. I don't care, Kellerman responded flatly. She stared at him for a long moment, weighing his words. Then, letting out a slow breath, she spoke. I've never had an office job, she admitted. Never had a title. You'll learn fast, Kellerman said. And if you need anything, I'm here. I don't have a wardrobe for this kind of thing, she said, her voice dry. I'll have HR send a clothing stipend, he replied, offering a small smile. Denise chuckled softly. You thought of everything, huh? I'm trying, he said, pausing before adding. But there's one more thing we need to figure out. What about your shift downstairs? Who replaces you? Kellerman smiled. We'll find someone, but no one can replace you for a long time. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Denise looked down at her hands, then back at him. You sure this isn't some kind of favor? He shook his head. This is overdue recognition. She bit her lip, her eyes glistening, but she blinked the tears away before they could fall. All right, then, she said, her voice firm. Let's see what I can do. Kellerman extended his hand, and she shook it firmly. It wasn't just a handshake. It was history being rewritten. But what neither of them expected was how everyone else in the building would react. By Wednesday, the news had spread faster than the elevators. Denise Atwater, the janitor from the night shift, had been promoted to an executive-level position. Nobody knew the full story, just whispers that she spoke multiple languages, that the CEO himself had chosen her, and that she might have some secret background, maybe government work, maybe even undercover. The gossip bounced from cubicle to conference room. Some people were curious. Some smiled and said, good for her. But not everyone was clapping. In the staff lounge, two marketing assistants leaned over their salads. Their voices hushed. I'm just saying, one whispered, I have a master's in international business, and I've been waiting 2 years for a promotion. This lady was scrubbing urinals last week. Her friend replied with a shrug. Maybe she knows something we don't. Oh, please, the first assistant muttered. It's Kellerman trying to look progressive, just checking a box. That same energy trickled into boardrooms and Slack messages. Quiet resentment mixed with confusion. People weren't used to seeing upward movement coming from outside the usual ladder. Denise felt it the second she stepped into her new office on the 12th floor. It was modest, just a desk, a plant, and a computer she hadn't touched yet. But to her, it felt like another planet. When HR finished onboarding her, she asked if she could keep her old janitor's uniform. Not to wear it, just to remind herself of where she had come from. That afternoon, she met with Victor, the head of international operations. He walked into her office with a clipboard in hand and tight eyes. He didn't shake her hand. He didn't sit. So, you're the new liaison, he said, his tone more of a challenge than a greeting. Denise looked up at him. That's what I'm told. You have experience in corporate environments? He asked, his voice cool. Denise smiled, only from the outside looking in. Victor didn't laugh. I've got reports from Italy, contract from our Dubai partners, and an entire vendor issue in Sao Paulo. Think you can manage that? Denise stood up. I'll need a few hours to review, but yes. Victor dropped the folder on her desk and walked out without another word. Later that night, Kellerman stopped by her office. How's day one? Denise leaned back in her chair, exhaling. I've had worse. Kellerman smiled. Victor give you a hard time? He doesn't scare me, she replied. Then she paused and added, Can I ask you something? Anything, Kellerman said. Why now? Why me? You could have just given me a bonus and kept moving. Kellerman leaned against the doorframe, looking thoughtful. Because I saw myself in you. Denise raised an eyebrow. You were a janitor? No, Kellerman replied, his voice softening. But I was overlooked a lot. I came from nothing. My dad fixed cars in a town no one visits. I worked 3 jobs through college. People thought I didn't belong in rooms like this. Denise nodded slowly. And now you're the one deciding who gets in. Kellerman smiled. Exactly. There was a beat of silence before Denise looked down at the file on her desk. I'll be honest, she said. I'm nervous. Good, Kellerman said, his voice firm. It means you care. Denise looked up. There are going to be people who hate this. They'll get over it, Kellerman said. Or they won't. Either way, we're moving forward. He stood up straighter. You have a story, Denise. A real one. And now you've got a platform. He turned to leave. As the door clicked shut behind him, Denise looked around her office. She remembered the years she spent crying in bathroom stalls during lunch breaks, the nights she came home with aching feet, and the birthdays she missed. She remembered the promotions that went to people who never even said good morning. She opened her desk drawer and placed her old janitor badge inside. Not to forget, but to remember exactly what it took to get here, But this story wasn't just hers anymore, and the spotlight was about to grow much brighter. By the end of the week, Denise's nameplate was mounted outside her office. Black letters on brushed steel. Denise Atwater, Cultural Liaison, International Affairs. It looked official. Clean. Permanent. The company-wide email hit inboxes Friday morning, sent by Kellerman himself. It was short, clear, and carried weight. He explained her role, her background, and, most importantly, her value. He didn't frame it as charity or a feel-good gesture. He made it clear she was the best person for the job, period. But that didn't stop the noise. Some managers grumbled under their breath. Others softened once they saw her in action. She navigated conversations with foreign clients better than their software, corrected mistranslations in old contracts that had cost them money for years, and she never showed off. She just worked, quietly, smoothly, better than anyone had expected. On Monday, Denise was asked to join a meeting by the end of the week. Denise had already proven herself. The company's North African expansion had been stuck for months, mired in miscommunication and mistrust. But when she walked into a meeting with a delegation from Morocco, everything changed. She wore a soft beige blazer and introduced herself in fluent Moroccan Arabic. The room shifted. You could feel the change in the air. People leaned in, their eyes focused on her, their attention peaked. When someone speaks your language, it's not just words you hear, it's respect. After the meeting, one of the Moroccan partners approached her privately. He touched his chest gently, a traditional sign of gratitude. "No one's ever done that for us," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "Not in our language. Not like that." Denise nodded, her expression calm. "You matter," she said simply. By midweek, Kellerman made another move. He renamed the company's main training room, where new hires gathered for orientation and where mid-level leaders held workshops. The plaque outside the door was taken down, replaced with a new one, the Atwater Room. There was no big announcement, no party, just a quiet change. It was a subtle shift, but one that meant more than any flowers or cake could ever express. Later that afternoon, Kellerman stood outside the room, watching as a new group of interns filed in. He overheard one of them whisper, "Who's Atwater?" A senior staff member answered, "She's someone who reminded this place that greatness doesn't always come in a suit." That same day, Denise found a sealed envelope on her desk. There was no return address, just her name handwritten in block letters. Inside was a note that read, "I used to think I'd be invisible forever, but today I stood a little taller because of you. Thank you." There was no signature, but the message was clear. People were watching. People who needed to see what was possible. Denise sat at her desk, staring at the note, her throat tightening. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. That was the moment she realized this wasn't just a job. It was a door. But not every door stays open without a fight, and someone was already planning to push back. The backlash didn't take long. Late Thursday, Denise was called into a meeting not by Kellerman, but by someone higher up, Eleanor Craig, a senior board member who'd flown in from Dallas. Eleanor had been with the company since the 90s. Sharp suits, sharper tongue. Denise walked into the small conference room on the 17th floor, where Eleanor sat with a stack of papers and a flat stare. "Have a seat," Eleanor said, not even looking up. Denise sat, and Eleanor tapped her pen twice before speaking. "So, Miss Atwater, I've reviewed your file," Eleanor said. "You have no college degree, no previous corporate training, and no management certifications." Denise didn't flinch. "That's correct." Eleanor folded her hands. "Sizing her up? You were a janitor here 3 weeks ago. Help me understand how someone with your background is now handling high-level international affairs." Denise met her gaze without hesitation. "Because I speak the languages. I understand the cultures. I've already fixed 2 vendor contracts and cleared a 3-month delay in our Morocco deal. I also helped secure a verbal agreement with our Brazilian partners that legal is finalizing next week." Eleanor pursed her lips, unimpressed. "You think this company should be run on instinct and charm?" Denise smiled slightly. "No, ma'am. I think it should be run on results." For the first time, Denise saw Eleanor hesitate. She wasn't used to being challenged so directly. "I don't need to be liked," Denise added, her voice steady. "But I do need to be useful. And I am." Eleanor stood up slowly and closed the folder with a snap. "You're a gamble." "I'm used to that," Denise said quietly. "My entire life's been one." When the meeting ended, Denise didn't return to her office right away. She walked out of the building and sat on a bench across the street, staring at the glass tower she now worked in. For so many years, she had walked past that building, wearing the same uniform, carrying cleaning supplies, wondering if anyone ever saw her. Now they did, and some didn't like it. She pulled out her phone and called her daughter. "Hey, Ma." Her daughter answered, her voice light. "Everything okay?" Denise hesitated, then nodded to herself. "Yeah, just needed to hear your voice." "You sure?" "I'm sure." They talked for a few minutes, about nothing important, groceries, her daughter's dog, a new movie she wanted to watch. But just hearing her laugh steadied Denise. After they hung up, she sat in silence for a moment. Then she stood up, walked back across the street, and rode the elevator back to her floor. By the next morning, word of the Eleanor Craig meeting had spread, and to everyone's surprise, Denise didn't back down. She showed up early, spoke at a team meeting, and took a call with the German office without needing a translator. Calm, sharp, and unbothered. That same day, a handwritten note appeared on the whiteboard outside her office. It read, "We see you." No name, just 3 words. But those 3 words meant the world to Denise. In the following weeks, something strange happened. People started coming to her, not just for translations, but for advice, guidance, and confidence. She became the person others went to before they pitched ideas. She'd sit with interns and give them tips before big presentations. And she never talked down to anyone. One of the interns, a shy Vietnamese kid named Bao, asked her, "How did you learn all those languages?" She smiled. "1 word at a time. Same way you will." Denise wasn't just doing her job. She was changing the culture. One afternoon, Kellerman joined her for coffee in the break room. "Been hearing good things," he said. She sipped her coffee. "Been trying to ignore the bad ones." "You're making waves," he said, smiling. "That a good thing?" she asked. He nodded. "Around here, it means you're doing something right." They stood in silence for a moment. "You know," he added, "I've been thinking about starting a training program for internal talent, especially folks working non-exempt roles. There's probably more Denises in this building." Denise nodded. "There are. They just haven't been seen yet." He looked at her. "Want to help me build it?" She smiled. "Already started in my head." By month's end, the pilot program launched. It was called Voice Inside, designed to give workers across departments access to language training, leadership mentoring, and visibility across divisions. It was Denise's idea, and it caught fire. Eventually, she was invited to speak at a logistics leadership summit in Cincinnati. She told her story not as a motivational tale, but as a reality check. "I was never just a janitor," she told the crowd. "I was fluent. I was capable. I was ready. But nobody ever looked long enough to see it. So, the next time you pass someone without a title, ask yourself, what are you really missing?" The room was silent. Then it stood, erupting in applause. On her way out, a young man approached her with tears in his eyes. "My mom's a housekeeper," he said, "and she speaks 5 languages. I used to be embarrassed to say that," he added. Denise touched his arm. "Don't ever be ashamed of where you come from. The only thing to be ashamed of is staying blind to brilliance." As she walked out of the building, Denise stood taller than she ever had, not because of the applause, not because of promotion, but because she hadn't changed who she was to fit the role. She had brought every layer of her story with her, and that made all the difference. Never assume you know someone's worth based on what they wear, where they work, or what their resume says. Talent has no dress code. Intelligence doesn't need permission. And brilliance can walk past you wearing a name tag and holding a mop. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or ignored, keep going. The right person will see you. And when they do, don't be afraid to take that seat at the table. Better yet, bring a few more chairs with you.